From some time zone-based shenanigans to supposed election interference to a petition calling on the open source initiative to publish full election results, including the candidates that were removed after the voting concluded. Since February, there has been a big mess surrounding the OSI, the open source initiative, the organization which gives us the open source definition, amongst various other important things. Right now, there is a big discussion around the initial version of the open source AI definition. This deserves an entire video unto itself, but the main point here is there is a lot of criticism around this definition. A lot of people don't think it really fits in the idea of what the open source definition is, and basically people are arguing. With this mess going on since February, I probably should have done a video by now. I don't know why I hadn't, but with the petition recently being released, now is as good a time as any. So let's go back to the very start so we understand what is happening here. This began with Luke Farrone having his board application rejected. This is because he submitted the application at 4 AM UTC time, which is perfectly fine in California where he lives, also where the OSI is based. The problem is the OSI had conflicting information about the cutoff time. So on their website, they did not specify the time zone that the cutoff was in. The reasonable way to interpret this is either in local time or anywhere in the world. So that cutoff point across every time zone. So whatever one happens last, that is the one you go by. Now, since the application was rejected, he put his full support behind Bradley Kuhn running as an affiliate candidate. Now, when this happened, the OSI defended this choice and defended not allowing him to run. The deadline for applications was February 17th at 11:59 PM UTC. Everyone qualified to run for elections, full members of the OSI, received an email notification with the time zone. We've updated the publicly facing webpage so this issue won't reappear, admitting that they had a miscommunication about the time zone. We've been asked about the possibility of extending the deadline for the one person who expressed an interest in running but misunderstood the deadline. This would be unfair to other candidates who submitted their applications on time. The slate of candidates will be made public this Friday, clarifying the candidates represent a diversity of viewpoints. This is not misunderstanding the deadline. This is a person who read the deadline you wrote, didn't check the email to see if for some reason the email would have a different time zone on it, and followed the rules that you laid out. This should have been extended by a day just to allow this one person to join. This wasn't like the start of voting or anything like that. There was no advantage being given. It was just allowing the person who submitted their application on time to be in the running. This didn't get a ton of attention at the time, but the people who did see it were widely critical of this move, including Bruce Perens, one of the founders of the OSI who has since left the organization. If you published the words UTC anywhere before the election, you'd be able to justify this, but you did not. So it just looks like you did some creative interpretation of rules to exclude an opposition candidate. I don't see how you'd be able to change anyone's mind about that. The facts are there for everyone to see. Now let's move on to the main characters of the election. Bradley M. Kuhn, a Software Freedom Conservancy member, and Richard Fontana, a Red Hat lawyer, running a shared platform of reformation. This can be seen right here over on Codeberg. Firstly, repeal the open source AI definition. This, as I mentioned earlier, has been heavily criticized, and Bradley Kuhn, Richard Fontana are very much involved in that criticism. Basically here, they feel like it was rushed out too quickly, there wasn't enough discussion, there wasn't enough feedback, and it doesn't really align with what the open source definition, not the open source AI definition, is trying to be. Also, there should be perhaps longer studies on this to work out what we actually want open source AI to mean. Secondly, adopt a process for formal review of previously approved licenses. So there is already a process to do this, and it's moving very slowly, and sometimes it does happen, but they want a clear, formal process to check over old licenses, because there are some licenses which are OSI approved, which are frankly not open source by the definition, but they were done in an earlier time, they had less legal knowledge back then, and they kind of just slipped through. Thirdly, remove the code of silence from the board member agreement. During the board deliberation, you're expected to disagree with any policies being discussed, but once a decision has been made, even if you don't agree with that decision, publicly, you either have to not comment on it or agree with any board decisions made. This is very common for corporate agreements, very common for non-profits, and I understand why it's here. But at the same time, it completely destroys transparency. And if bad decisions are being made, being a whistleblower is actively breaking this board member agreement. And lastly, directors should be allowed to use FOSS for board activities. So OSI board activities require the use of proprietary software and agreeing to Google's terms of service. The OSI is very much a corporate-y organization nowadays, and if you actually, want to be the representatives of open source, this is the same way I feel about the Linux Foundation, not using Linux in a lot of cases, you should be at least able to use, if not expected to use, open source and free software things. This election had a rough start to say the least, but the time zone shenanigans were not the only problem that were already happening, and Bradley Kuhn wrote a blog post outlining everything weird going on with this OSI election. But firstly is the time zone thing. Rather than using California time, like the OSI is based in, or anywhere on Earth time, which is what not having a time zone would indicate, they chose UTC, which was not specified on the site. Now, they did specify it in their email, in one of the 3 emails sent. Again, if you don't see that one specific email, or maybe you look at the latest one and it doesn't seem like anything is out of order, why would you question anything? Secondly, for a whole year running up to the election, they were wrong about the number of open seats available. So in the archive, they were saying 1 affiliate director and 2 individual member directors. That's wrong. That's not at all correct. It was actually 2 affiliate directors and 1 individual director. This was changed last minute after the nominations closed. Now, affiliate directors and member directors are different kinds of directors. Affiliates are nominated by an affiliate organization like Debian, GNOME Foundation, things like that, and then member directors, they can just be anyone who is a member of the OSI. If we had known there were 2 affiliate seats and just 1 member seat, Debian, an OSI affiliate, would have nominated Luke a week early to the affiliate seat. Instead, Debian's leadership, Luke, Fontana, and I had a complex discussion in the final week of nominations on how best to run the ticket of 3. In that discussion, Debian leadership decided to nominate no one instead of nominating Luke, precisely because I was nominated on a platform that Debian supported, and Debian chose not to run a candidate against me for the, at the time, purported 1 affiliate seat available. And that's just for this trio, but who knows what any of the other affiliates would have done if they'd known what seats were actually available. OSI has treated every one of their affiliates unfairly by changing the number of seats available after the nominations closed. Not being correct about the number of seats available, that by itself is a reason to rerun the entire nomination process. Thirdly is the ordering of the nominations on the voting. Normally you would use alphabetical ordering, maybe first name, last name, maybe random ordering, something like that. In this case though, the first person listed was the incumbent affiliate, so the person who already held a seat. It is a well-established phenomenon that the first person listed in voting has an advantage. Fourth issue, there is a discourse forum where affiliate candidates can join and announce their candidacy, and they're required to join and answer questions. This is fine for the members, because members are OSI members, and to join the discourse, you have to be an OSI member. The problem is it explicitly states, affiliates may nominate any individual as a candidate. This individual need not be an OSI member. So explicitly stating you don't need to be an OSI member, but it's a requirement to be an OSI member and join this forum and answer questions. These two things cannot be true at the same time. And there are affiliate candidates like Bradley Kuhn who do not want to join the OSI, and this effectively bars them for no reason when it explicitly states you don't need to be a member. Sure, okay. Now, the fifth thing is kind of a minor thing. Bradley was nominated by the Matrix Foundation, the Pearl and Raku Foundation, the Software Freedom Conservancy, which is his employer, and Snowdrift.coop. The problem is, on the affiliate candidate page, it only mentions one affiliate you were nominated by. If he had known there would only mention one, he would have listed those in his candidate statement. Sixth thing, prior to the campaign period starting, it was said by the OSI you would have 10 days and 2 weekends to run your campaign. Great. Now, when they got there, turns out they only had 6.5 days. Fine. This would have been okay if it was announced beforehand, people knew about it. The problem is people reached out to the election coordinator and they were being told that they were unavailable to answer questions until after the election ended. So you don't know why the campaign period is shorter, you want to know why, and the person who can answer your questions is on holiday. And seventh thing, Bradley, as you would expect anyone to do during an election, reached out to the voting affiliates asking them, hey, like, what are your issues? What do you want to see done? Things like that. You know, normal election campaigning stuff that anyone would do. Now, a lot of people might think this is stupid and don't really want to see it and don't want to respond. Fine. The problem is an OSI staffer reached out to the affiliates and was like, hey, we're sorry that a candidate is spamming you and trying to ask you questions, and we didn't give out the emails for you guys so they could go and do that. In the middle of the campaigning period, it was never stated that you're not allowed to do this. This is, you know, basic election stuff that anyone in an election would reasonably expect that you can do. Even without stating who is doing it, it's obvious who's doing it, right? Like, they're not stupid. They can see who got the emails. Having an OSI staffer doing this during the middle of a campaign, like, that is going to give people a negative perception of that candidate because it seems like they're breaking some sort of rule that the affiliates probably haven't read every single line of how an election is done. So they're going to assume, like, oh, this person is just breaking the rules to, like, do something. Like, that's obvious election interference. And Bradley ended everything by saying, basically, reopen the nominations, restart everything, or just delete this election, because this is a disaster. This is not how you run an election. Now, it is worth noting that OSI director elections are purely advisory. Like most nonprofits, the OSI is governed by a self-perpetuating, not an elected board. I bet with all talks of elections, you didn't even know that. Now, there's nothing wrong having a self-perpetuating board. If they want to do that, like, that's fine. It's just worth noting, right? It's just an amusing thing to keep in mind. Now, with all of that, about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes into the video, check the bar down below. Now we have the backstory. Now let's move on to the real fun stuff. Jumping ahead a few days to the closure of the voting, about 1 hour after that happened, all of the board candidates were sent a document to sign. This is the board member agreement. Now, the problem here is it was never stated that candidates would have to sign the board member agreement. Only people that were on the board had to sign this. This is the way it's always been done. It wasn't stated in the orientation. It was specifically stated that only seated directors would have to sign the agreement. Again, this is another change of the process during the election. This is the version of the document that Bradley Kuhn signed. He wasn't a fan of using DocuSign like the OSI wanted him to use. He instead went and physically signed it, and nobody ever stated that the physical signing was what they took issue with. And this right here is the version that Richard Fontana signed. Once again, you can see it right here. Now, Richard Fontana asked the OSI, hey, what's the deal with being required to sign this when we're not a member of the board yet? We're literally still just candidates. This is what a member stated. While the polls were open, we've heard there may be candidates with no intention to sign the board agreement, which has become a mandatory requirement since you last served. We need to know who the actual candidates are before we run the STV calculation to determine the outcome of the vote. So for process efficiency, the board asked all candidates to confirm their good faith intention to serve on the board so we can tell the software. The board agreement only applies to seated members. If that is the case, it should have been part of the process. If it's not part of the process, you should do it in the following election and not change the election process in the middle of the election. Now, here's where things get a little bit funky. A few days passed, and there were no results. This was unexpected of the OSI because usually election results are released the next day. Like, no issue whatsoever. Then when the results were released, that's when we found out what happened. So, announcing the new directors of the OSI board. And if you look at the voting, notice the people that are missing. There is no mention of Richard Fontana or Bradley Kuhn anywhere in the results. They were removed from the votes not before the voting started, so they were dropped as a candidate. They were removed from the results after the voting concluded. Now, to be fair here, you're not just voting for a single person, you're doing ranked voting. So if one of the people you vote for is removed, it just goes down to the next person on the list of rankings you voted for. However, if you have ranked voting and someone is removed, maybe the ordering you would have done would have been different because you feel differently about different people if certain candidates are there or not. So even if you're doing this, it still messes with the way that people may have voted. Now, as should be expected, this is where people first started noticing what was going on. Michael Downey saying, voter suppression based upon incumbent speculation about what a fully eligible candidate may or may not do in the future to satisfy a future requirement to which that candidate is not yet obligated, sure is not a good look. Why did that not load? Aaron Wolf. Many of us care about principles of transparency, integrity, and democracy in general. It isn't healthy to allow this sort of chaos to give the impression that elections can have arbitrary last-minute changes. It undermines trust in the whole premise. You have responsibility to restore and retain community trust. Trust is the only thing the OSI has to offer as an org. Richard Litterer of the Gnome Foundation. The OSI's purpose is to be a trusted, legitimate source for what open source is and how to use it. When they fail at holding meaningful, equitable elections, and when they push through controversial work like OSAID, that is the open source AI definition, and then gag board members from disagreeing with it publicly, they undermine their own work. I don't know if the OSI needs to exist right now to legitimize open source software. It doesn't stop snake oil open source software or open washing. Surely the public can just call a spade on their own. And Daniel Stenberg of the Curl Project. This week, OSI helps us realize how quickly you can demolish trust in an organization. And there was a comment from Stefano who we saw on the forum before, obviously not in agreement. The agreement you and Richard Fontana signed was not the one the board sent you, and most importantly, is not the one everyone else, candidates and sitting directors signed. This is my last message on the topic. Now, this is technically correct. So again, let's have a look at Bradley's document and Richard's document. So, if we look through it, for the most part, this is the board agreement. Notice this right here, though, and on Bradley's. This has a bit crossed out here, along with this bit right here, and there's this addendum here, and then Richard Fontana has this addendum down here. So basically what they've both done here is... this is why it's so dumb. Technically, the OSI is not wrong for removing them from the election. Now, it's stupid that candidates were supposed to sign this because it wasn't part of the process, but they removed the part stating the whole you have to publicly agree with the OSI choices, removing the code of silence. So it is correct to say that they didn't sign the one sent to everyone else. But it doesn't mean this isn't funny. Is this saying they wouldn't sign the actual board agreement at the agreed upon time prior to the election starting, which is if they win a seat on the board? No, it is not stating that. And do I think they should have been removed for this when they changed the process in the middle of an election? Absolutely not. If you want to bar them from the board after winning and then they don't agree to sign it, fair. That is your agreed upon process. Don't change the process in the election. Now, it turns out Bradley and Richard were not the only people removed from the results. Another person, Bentley Henzel, was also removed. In his case, he missed the signing deadline by a few hours, again, for something that is not part of the election process. And if you're away from your system for a couple of days, which is fine when you don't think there's anything you need to do for this election, to remove someone from the results for a process change in the middle of the election is stupid. Now, following this whole election mess, Aaron Wolf and Ian Kelling created a petition to the OSI, not a petition to change the results. Those are already in. It is what it is. But a petition to publish the full, real election result that included the people removed for something that wasn't a process in the election. We, the undersigned, petitioned the open source initiative OSI to release the complete, unaltered results of its 2025 Board of Directors election. We believe that by removing candidates and votes after voting concluded, OSI has damaged its credibility. We call for transparency as a first step towards repairing the OSI's integrity and reputation. Now, you can say petitions are dumb, they don't change anything. And yeah, they don't change anything if you're petitioning the government or petitioning a major AAA game studio. The OSI is a lot smaller than that. And this already has a number of quite, influential voices on this list, including the Gnome Foundation, Richard Lauterer, Aaron Wolf, a bunch of OSI members, a bunch of Debian people. This is becoming... It's still a short list, don't get me wrong, but it's getting attention, and anybody is free to sign it. So I will leave the petition linked down below. If you don't want to use Codeberg, there is a mirror on GitHub as well, or you can email them to go and sign it as well. However you want to do so, if you feel like you want to see the real election result and who actually won here with unaltered voting, go ahead and sign it. Is anything going to happen? I don't know. But right now, this is the only thing that can be done. If you care about transparency, if you want the OSI to actually, represent people in this community and in this development space, go ahead and sign it. But what do you think? Do you think anything's going to happen here? Do you think we're going to see the full results? I'd love to know. And do you support a reformation platform at the OSI trying to pull back this open source AI definition, not wanting the board members to have to publicly agree to everything stated by the OSI? I'd love to know. So, if you like the video, go like the video. Go support the petition. It's down below. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Sally Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and do it. Do it. Do it.